Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove and today joined by Paul Montgomery, football scout, talent spotter, advises several Premier League clubs. He's well known in this neck of the woods for signing some of Newcastle's favourite players under Sir Bobby Rob. I've had Paul on before. Behind him on the shelf that you can't see is his book, which was launched a few months ago. So we'll talk about how that has gone. But also in today's episode, we're going to talk about Newcastle's transfer window so far, the players they've signed and the players that they could yet sign to improve Eddie Howe's squad. Paul, how are we doing? Welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Not really a good time, is it, for Newcastle listeners or fans? You know, I'm being brought up as a kid from a pit village as an avid Newcastle fan. I mean, the rest of my other family will be Foreman, actually, because my dad wouldn't eat bacon because it was red and white, whereby half the other family were Sunderland fans, you know. So, but yeah, I was brought up in the old turnstiles and etc. And been through a lot with Newcastle, which we all have ups and downs. But if that's your team, that's your team, you know. And I had the honour of working with 4 managers there, you know. So it was great times. But at the moment, from the euphoria, we've kind of dipped a little bit with the problem with the striker, you know. It's a major issue for Newcastle and the manager, who's done really well, you know, but now he must be fearing the new season to a certain degree on how it's going to pan out, you know.
Well, we'll talk about Alexander Isak in a brief moment, but you mentioned there the euphoria, obviously winning the Carabao Cup, qualifying for the league, and we all thought coming into this transfer window after a barren spell in the market that it would be a transformational summer. It hasn't gone to plan. Are you surprised at how off-road it has gone to what we expected before the transfer window opened? Or did you perhaps think, especially we do now look back in hindsight, that actually maybe we did, some Newcastle fans were guilty of being maybe a little bit too optimistic and a little bit too positive given PSR constraints and what have you?
Yeah, I think it's more, I think the best adjective was disappointed. You know, disappointed in the way it's gone, especially when you've had 2 windows with nothing. And I'm a believer in honesty. And the Newcastle fans are, as you know, absolutely on a different level to everything else. And they just want the same. And I remember when I came back here once with Glenn Roeder when he was the manager, and I remember Freddie Shepherd was the chairman then, and they had a financial problem at the time, and he openly said to the manager, "Look, we can't do nothing this window, we can't do nothing next window, but after that, we'll be okay and we can sign players." And he actually went out through the Chronicle and told the fans that, which that's what they want to hear, if you understand what I'm saying. And I remember that season they played Manchester United, and Manchester United them days was the top side, and Glenn had to play 2 or 3 young players who had never played in the first team, but the crowd were like a 12th man because they understood the circumstances that he was in because of no fund. So I think that what I'm trying to say is that when you've had 2 windows with nothing, I think the club could have been a bit more transparent in where they were financially. Yeah, if it was the FFP, you know, the financial fair play ruling, etc., they could have said, right, this is the situation. We need to reel ourselves in. We're going to have nothing this window and next window, but then the window after, we should be in a position to improve the squad. And quite rightly, I mean, after winning the first silverware and then qualifying for the Champions League, you know, with maybe 2 additions, you're then, you know, rocking and rolling for improvement, because you've always got you start when you're building up a side, you've got foundations of a side. Then through the manager, me being a recruitment man, through the manager, he identifies what positions he would like to be better. And then it's your role as a recruitment man to go and find those players that will make the side better. You know, there's no point in signing a player who's the same as what you've got. You've got to sign a player who's going to improve your side, you know.
I want to ask you about how it works during the transfer market. I think that's going to be really interesting. I'm sure our viewers and listeners We'll listen intently. But just on what you've mentioned there about being honest, I guess the club would probably argue, well, actually, we don't want to show a hand to potential selling clubs or buying clubs that were in maybe a bit of a weaker position, or the other side that we've actually got a ton of money to spend, although I can't get the transparency argument. Do you think the fact that the boardroom isn't in as strong as a position as they'd like it to be, with Darren Eales on his way out, they're going to hopefully appoint his replacement in the next few weeks, and also Paul Mitchell leaving unexpectedly? Eddie Howe's come out and said he was none the wiser. He was on holiday, and then all of a sudden his phone started going off, and it was that Paul had gone. Some suggest that the club tried to persuade him to stay on, but he was ready to go. Having those two positions effectively vacant for what was meant to be a transformational window, is that been a major issue, do you think?
Yeah, yes, it has. Obviously, it will have been, because you need to have your bodies who are going to do the role that you want them to do. For example, I don't know how they work in Newcastle now. I mean, the chief executive, sadly, through his health, has decided to, for his own benefit, which is totally understandable. And they haven't yet replaced him yet, which is a bit strange when you think about it. And then Newcastle were operating with the director of football. Should that be replaced? But I got the impression that now that the manager is controlling the recruitment side, which is something he's kind of, I think I got the impression he's wanted to be in control. But having said that, if you're a recruitment man, the manager's always involved with the recruitment. I have never, I've been I could sign a player without having a discussion with the manager, but I never ever did that. I was always, you work with the manager, because he's got to coach the player, and then he would just throw it back in your face. You give me that one, by the way. I thought, no thanks. So you always got to, for me personally, the way it's done is like the manager will point which positions he wants or would like to be improved. I mean, I know they've always wanted a wide right player, an upgrade in that. Although having said that, I get it. If we were speaking 2 or 3 years ago and we spoke about Murphy as being the wide right player, we would think more as a squad player. But he is. You've got to give credit where it is. He's been outstanding. He has been outstanding. It's a bit unfair, actually. For me, over the season, I would imagine he's the most consistent player over the season. I mean, he's done really well. However, it was documented that the manager wanted to improve that position, and he wanted to. So then it's a recruitment scenario to come back and say, right, these are the best 3, in my opinion. Which do you prefer? And then you go boom, 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 and you say that one. And then it's for the recruitment people to go and get that player. Now, that's where I think Newcastle are lacking. I don't think they've got, it doesn't appear they have this person. I mean, I know where I was. You've got to be aggressive in the recruitment more. You've got to be aggressive. These days, people get a little bit lazy. I'm sorry to give you a bad side, but I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that's happening in Newcastle. But in general, they get lazy. They pick the phone up, speak with the agent. Will your player come here, etc., etc. No. You've got to get to the player, because it's the player that tells the agent where he wants to go. For me, when I wanted to sign a player, I would straight away, if I made a decision on that was a player that was going to improve the team, etc., I'd be right. I want to meet you, whether it's in a hotel, whatever, or get on a flight, get across here on a Sunday morning when there's nobody there, can see you, show them the stadium, show them the videos of the fans, blah, blah, blah. This is where you're going to be our main man, etc., etc., etc. And he goes, whoa, thank you very much. That'll do. And then I would get the manager to say, I need 15 minutes with you to implement what I'm saying, because he wants to hear it from you, not just me, because I'm just a guy who's identified, and he can feel my passion. It's about passion. The players feel your passion. I don't want to go and mention names that I've done it with, but I've done it. And the players stick with you. And I think Newcastle are lacking that, to go and prove that you know, we want you here, not just phone calls and things like that. You've got to get them, and they want to hear that from you, you know, to face, and they will. And a lot of players, you know, people going about a money scenario. No, there is some, I think, still in the profession whereby if a player decides, oh, I really like this project, I really fancy this guy, so passionate, you know, and I've been to the stadium, I've been to the fans, they will stay with you. No ifs, buts, or maybes. They will stay with you, regardless who comes in for you. Look what, you know, I mean, the best example was, you know, when they were looking for a wide right player, you know, a club that I have association with, Crystal Palace, with the chairman, Steve Parish. You know, they had arguably a difference player in that position with Olise. You know, Olise is a terrific player. He's what you call a difference player in my head. This is my language. And you can replace a player with another player, but it is very, very difficult to replace a difference player, which Newcastle have a difference player in Isak, but as well as others. But at that time, Olise was a difference player, and there was a no-brainer with him closing his contract. That was the thing, you know. And I speaking to people involved in you know, oh yeah, we like him, we fancied him. I said, well, go and get him. See, Bayern Munich, boom, on a flight with his guy and his parents across the stadium, job done. They did the same when they did with Kim, when they robbed Man United of Kim. They did the same with Harry Kane. You know what I mean? That's aggression in them. Go and get them. Get on a plane, get them. And can I tell you something? Any player that comes here and gets in that stadium and they're showing videos of the crowd. I mean, look at the crowd after they won the first silverware. It does affect in the head. It's a big swaying of whether someone's coming or not, and that's how you've got to be. And I think, you know, and it's like when Dan Ashworth was there. You know, Dan, it's like when you're at school, you have a theory lesson and a practical. I would say he was good at theory, but it's the practical you've got to be good at as well. You know.
Some fantastic insight there. And I'm sure, obviously, we can't put that to the club, but I'm sure they would argue that they are very passionate and aggressive in their own right in terms of getting their targets over the line. Obviously, Steve Nixon does quite a bit of travelling, and now it's Andy Howe and Eddie Howe working together and trying to improve the squad. In terms of that right wing position that we're talking about, obviously, they signed Anthony Elanga from Nottingham Forest, man they've watched for a long, long time. I saw him in the flesh for the first time on Saturday against Atletico Madrid. Really impressive in the first half. Full of pace, down the flank, wants to take on the full back. Really big burst of pace as well, going up against them.
He's rapid.
Yeah. What do you make of that? Is that the upgrade you think Newcastle have been looking for on the right wing?
Well, you know, football is about opinion. You know, you could speak to 10 different people, and they all have opinion about a player. Bobby Robson would say to me, and you know, Paul, 50,000 fans and hundreds of thousands at home have got an opinion. But at them days, the manager made the decision on which players he brought. You know, not a sport director. Bob would say, you know, it's whose opinion I accept that counts. You know, but I want you to see every player that's put in front of me. So it's about opinion. I mean, with I didn't see the Anthony with the Elanga situation, because for me, Anthony is, if you're playing on the counter, you know, he's very good. I mean, because his asset is he's rapid. I think his skill sets need to improve end product, but you know, his asset is the pace, which is on the counter. But I don't see Newcastle playing on the counter at home very much. They've got open doors, and I think that that's because you're in Champions League and you're going to be playing twice a week for a lot of months. You've got to have, you know, literally 2 players for every position, so as you can rest and play. I mean, because not everybody can play every game. It's just impossible. And in today's, the way the game's played today, with the intensity and the pace, they can't expect any one player to play week in, week out. You've got to rest. So yeah, he's a good signing. Right now you have 4 wide players, for want of a better expression, with Barnes and Gordon, and then you have Murphy and Elanga. So no brainer. You just now need to find 2 strikers.
I was going to say they're well stocked on the wing, and we're going to talk about strikers in a moment. Just a reminder that this episode is sponsored by NORD VPN. You can click the link in the podcast description box to get discounts on your plan. There's no risk with NORD because it's a 30-day money-back guarantee. And if you're going on holiday and you want to keep up to date with all your UK shows, sign up to NORD and you can keep up to date with all your favourite TV shows. Obviously, you have to have the relevant subscriptions, but you can switch location and never miss your favourite TV show or a Newcastle United match if it is indeed on telly. And also sign up for Saily. That's your eSIM provider from the creators of NORD VPN. Again, we are offering a discount if you click the link in your podcast description box. Stay connected, secure, and support the podcast at the same time. Thank you to NORD for being on board. They've also, Newcastle United, Paul, signed Aaron Ramsdale. Looks like he's going to be Newcastle United's number 1 in the coming months. Obviously, they still have Nick Pope in net, who is more than capable. He's, for me, one of the best shot stoppers in the Premier League. Is Aaron Ramsdale the upgrade that Newcastle United have been after?
You're telling me he's going to be the number 1. I'm a bit surprised at that because I would have thought Pope would be the number 1. I mean, obviously, Pope's a massive frame in front of them. And lots of people these days, hang on, you sign a goalkeeper to stop the ball from going in the net. What he does with his feet, shouldn't be relevant. But sadly, in this modern day, it is relevant, because every team starts from the back with the keeper, etc. So that is his weakness, for want of a better expression. That's maybe why he's not an England number 1 keeper, because of his, ability or lack of ability with the feet. However, he is a very good shot stopper. So I'm not just sure Ramsdale will be in him. He's got to dispossess, Pope from that position. I mean, I think I would put them on par. They've got similarities. But I wouldn't say that Ramsdale is going to, for me personally, would come in and say he's an upgrade to Pope, because I think Pope takes some beating, pardon the pun, when it comes to shot stopping.
Do you think the ideal situation when it comes to the goalkeeping department would have been Newcastle managed to have signed James Trafford and have Nick Pope in for the next season, maybe 2, and then James Trafford slowly build up to become the long-term number 1?
That's one of the things that we spoke about with this lack of aggression. It seems as though there's a lack of aggression and decisiveness in the recruitment scenario. Now, I don't know who's to blame. You have to ask the people in Newcastle. Or maybe it's harsh to use the word blame. It's not really a blame. It's just the way they operate. I mean, Trafford's been there for over a year, and we're arguing over some minuscule difference, which is quite strange, because they've waited and waited and waited. Now Man City have just took the clause that they had to buy back, but they weren't interested. That was a non-starter for them at the time when Newcastle were interested. And so I have no idea why they've messed about with that. But I mean, once, which I said last year to a couple of your colleagues, once that Trafford was for want of a better, like treading water, that Ramsey was the manager's first choice. Sorry, second, but had escalated to the number 1 choice because of with them having them in the past experience with them, But I think it's a good idea. That means you got 2 good keepers. So I don't say that as being negative. But I find that I find that I would still think at the moment, unless he has a poor start this season, I would say Pope is your number 1 keeper.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on the battle for number 1 at Newcastle United. They are also, Newcastle United, closing in on Malick Thiaw, who's had his medical. We're just waiting for that one to be announced. Coming in from AC Milan, 24-year-old German international. What have you seen of him, and how do you think he's going to cope in the Premier League?
I think, well, again, we're on another one where Newcastle have flirted with him for a couple of years. And they were talking about paying 20 million for him when he first started seeing it. Now, I think the price is inflated. Personally, if I'm in control of somewhere, I wouldn't pay that fee, but that's the same for a lot of players these days. That's just a personal opinion. I think he has a chance. He's got improve on a couple of aspects on his game, but obviously from Newcastle's point of view, they needed another central defender. I have no idea why they haven't gone back for Gay, which is because he was definitely the manager's number one choice. And at that time, Steve Parish, the chairman, wanted 70 million because he didn't want to sell him. But now he only has a year left. He thought in his head that would be reduced to fit, but he was prepared to get, because at least we stayed in the league, which we did. Palace not only stayed in the league, we won the cup, first time ever for silverware. And you get the Sky money, which is 140 million pounds. So it was a gamble worth taking. But now, because Palace's situation, they're a relatively small club to everybody else, and they've done amazing to stay in the Premier League for so many consecutive years. They don't have the financial clout of the big teams. So it looks like the club have to sell him, because it would be criminal for them to leave free, because it looks as though Mark doesn't want to sign another extension. So, you're talking now, because Palace need to sell, that you would get him a lot cheaper. So you would maybe get him for the same price as what you've signed the Milan player. So I just don't get that one from Newcastle's point of view, because they could have went in and took Mark, in my opinion. And I know Liverpool want to sign him. But again, you've got to let the player know that he's better off up here than what he is in Liverpool. That's the idea of selling the same. Newcastle don't need really selling, but it just does help the fact of making that player feel wanted, But I don't understand, and I hope, let's hope that he's a success, the boy. But for me, if I had the option, it would be Gay, because he's not easy on the eye, but he's there. He's a good defender.
He's got that Premier League experience.
He's there. He's like, he's just there. When somebody needs to stop something, he's there. His starting lines are really good. He's a very good defender.
You mentioned on Malick Thiaw that there's a couple of aspects that need to be improved upon. Could you share that with our viewers and listeners, where you think his strengths are, but also what his weaknesses are?
It's just basic, sometimes he's starting like tends to ball follow, you know what I mean? And just a couple of kind of tweaks to his game, but every player needs to improve certain amounts of the game. But if you're just looking at a critical side, but constructive, I'm sure maybe coming to a club like Newcastle with the fans behind, when he gets in, that increases a player's performance anyway. Mm-hmm. When you get into the St. James's Park forum of that crescendo of noise, you can't help but your game level. It's a totally different level to Italy. It's a totally different level in Germany, etc. From that thing. So it does give a player a little bit of impetus and a little bit of extra in their play,
He's said to be a great passer of the ball as well, which is something that fits into Eddie Howe's strategy in Newcastle, kind of like the perfect replacement in time of Fabian Schär. Looking elsewhere for Newcastle United, they're reportedly in talks for Jacob Ramsey of Aston Villa. We know that they're after that kind of midfielder. Do you think he would be good for Newcastle United, Jacob Ramsey from Villa?
Well, he's a good player, but where's he going to play? you would have. Does the manager want a situation where you've got to keep players who are unhappy happy? It's very difficult. You've got to assess where's he going to play. And at the moment, you've got literally 4-ish midfield players with Guimaraes and Tonali. And then you've got Joelinton. Then you've got Willock. And then you've got the young boy who's come through.
Miley, yeah.
Miley, so you've got to think for me, if you're looking for a midfield player, I'd be wanting more of a 6, that type. But I know from what I hear, the manager doesn't want to play with that one holding, like the Roy Keane type of number 6. He doesn't want to play that way. He wants to play with a 2. And to be honest, Sean Longstaff did really well with Guimaraes, but they're both box-to-boxy type players. They're not 6s. But the system worked better with Tonali, and because he was more intelligent, he would sit a little bit better than what Sean would, because rather than being kamikaze, both of them up doing the box to box. So the system worked better with Tonali. So yeah, okay. With that in mind, you've got. Do you need another midfielder? But I would, in my opinion, try and find someone who was more of a 6y type player. To be able to defensive, because you are susceptible on the counter with everybody when you're in an offensive team.
Regular viewers and the listeners know that I'm a big fan of Hayden Hackney at Middlesbrough. I think he would fit that role quite well. Ipswich have been in for 20 million. So for me, in today's market, it's a bit of a bargain.
Yeah,
not as big of a fan.
I want him to do more. When I watch him, I want him to do more. He has a good chance. But I want him to do more, If I was with, I would be sitting down, I want you to do more in a game,
Is there any names that you would push towards Newcastle in that position then, if it's not Hayden Hackney? Is there anyone else you would say to Newcastle, you need that central midfielder to come in to help shore up what you've already got? This is the player that I would recommend.
When it comes to midfielders, listen, there's one player there's a player who would be awesome, but where would you play him? Is Eza, he's a difference player, but where would you play him? Again, where would you play him in a system? Like, I know Newcastle wanted to were interested in Madison, the season before that, who's a very good player, but sadly the boys got a bad injury. Where would you play a system where you would have someone allowed the spit? I'm a big, for me personally, there was a player in my head was wasted a little bit of Man City. That was Grealish, because when Jack was at Villa, he had a little bit of a free, like an inside lefty. Roadway was a bit freer, and he's a much better player than being stuck out on the left flank. It was a bit of a waste of talent. And I noticed when Lee Carsley was the manager, Lee was a player I signed at Birmingham. And I remember when Lee took over the England national and he brought Grealish into the squad. I noticed he played him more central, more inside. And that's where he benefits. He's better at creating things. And, so there are players that like him, like Eza, who is terrific. Absolutely, he glides. He's the second player I've seen to Thierry Henry who glides across the surface. I'm trying to give a description when they run with the ball. They look as though they're like floating. You know what I mean? And Eza's a great player, but again, where would you play him? And see, Newcastle have a good balance at the moment. Because the big fella, Joelinton. You've got to put they had a little bit of luck with them, because you've got to understand they paid £40 million for a number 9, and Joelinton had never ever been a number 9, and I just could never whoever decided it's sacrilege, to give a guy a number 9, because the pressure is immense, because Newcastle have had number 9s the best, that has been their, their. If you mention Newcastle, it's always the number 9 has always been top. And the poor guys come from Hoffenheim, they give him a number 9 shirt. Whoever give him a number 9 shirt, certifying and saying, because he'd never been a number 9 in his life. And sadly, it was looked as though a disaster until the manager comes in, and now the midfield, I don't think, could operate without him. So weird, the turnaround is unreal because he's so physical. The boy's so physical, and he's improved so much.
But that's the issue, isn't it? Especially with that midfield, is that I think on their day when everyone's fit and firing, Tonali, Bruno, and Joelinton, it's arguably the best midfield in the Premier League. So when you're shopping in the transfer market and you need another centre midfielder to come in, how, in your experience, does it work? Because are you shopping for someone who comes in and is better than them, or are you shopping for someone that comes in underneath and offers?
Well, you've got two. One, no point in getting someone the same. It's got to be better or younger who can improve with great players around him, improve his game, and become a number 1. But when you get to the level of Newcastle, it does become difficult because you can't just go and sign X, Y, and Z because they're not better than what you've got. No point in signing players who are not better than what you already have. So that's why you got to do a lot of diligence, a lot of work, a lot of homework to be sure, right, this guy fulfills all the requirements that the manager wants from this position. Boom. And then you go and get that player. But it isn't easy.
How does it work then in terms of talent spotting in your experience? So at the start, I mean, I said obviously you're working all year round, but at the start of the window, I suppose you've either got your list of names that you recommended to the manager, or you've got a list of positions that he wants to improve. But I'm really intrigued to know how it works as the window goes on, and maybe the clubs become a little bit more desperate because they haven't got the top targets or they haven't filled the positions. Does your role run alongside that change within what's needed as the window gets towards its end?
Well, I always work the other way. They organised. If you're organised, you're ready for that window, and you'll have sport the players you want, and you'll have got there. Like I've said, even if it was privately, you would have them in that. I want to come to this club, etc., etc. So I think only once happened to me where I got into what we call in the trade, you call it a scattergun mode. Scatterguns where you boom, 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 the agents are flying in names left, right, and centre to you, and you haven't got a clue who half them are. You haven't done any diligence on the player. You haven't done any work on it. So you're in a minefield, which is not a good scenario. And then when you get like that, what should happen is the manager or the chief executive said, hang on a minute, we don't want to be like this again. We want to be organised. We want to have our players identified and well in advance and actually done deals. And, many a time when I was operating at that level, I would even go as far, and which is something that you'll not like, being a press guy, I would say I do not sign players through the press. And I would say, if your player and us are linked in the press, there'll be no deal. Because what happens is that alerts to the clubs to the fact that people might even think about that player, they go, oh, why is he signing him? Etc., etc. That's how it works. So I used to insist when I was speaking to him, if this is in the press, it's no deal. The press can find out once you've agreed, everything's agreed, etc., etc. And you have that, everybody has a different way of operating, but you've got to have a little bit of strength in you, to be able to make sure this happens. And it's the same with, it's the same when you identify and when you bring in the player somewhere, you've got to be able to sit with the player, like as I've said before, and persuade him, this is where you want to be. This is the project. And he's got, oh, I like this. And then you do it, because what happens is in this modern day, sadly, this may sound exaggerated, but a contract in the modern days and worth the paper that be in your toilets, I'm afraid, at the moment, because that's the way football is. Because, as you know, in the past, which I've worked in the past, I have past and present. In the past, you know, you couldn't speak to a player unless you rang the club first and said, look, you sell this player, etc., and then they give you permission to speak. That's non-existent now, because this is the evolvement with the agent. Because all you do is you pick the phone up and say, look, I fancy your guy. Will he come to us? Because you don't want to waste your time. You don't want to put all your energy identifying a player. Let's say it's a striker. And at the end of the day, agree a fee with the club, and then the player go, oh, don't want to go there. So all that has to be done prior. So as you know, that's a goer at the end of the day, and you've got him in the bag, etc., etc. And you know, and for me, clubs. Sorry to mention with Alex's case. Obviously, it's quite evident what's happened there. It's not rocket science, you know. He was courted by Arsenal, and then obviously Liverpool now. I mean, and I think the Arsenal situation was half the reason why Edu left. I think that was a major thing for Arteta, because he identified he'd always wanted a striker, as you know, and he identified the likes of Ivan Toney, who obviously they would have said that's no chance because he's going to take mega bucks in Saudi, and the other one was Isak, and then he must say, oh well, you know, like over a year ago they said, well, it'll be 100 million plus. We haven't got that money, so I think he, you know, Arteta wasn't very happy, so he kind of took a back step. But Liverpool, they worked that way, and they did the same with Gay, you know, last year when he was 70. No, not for us, but we'll come back when he has a year left. You know, and they're talking about 35 million or something at the moment, you know, but they'll have done the same with Alex. And what will have happened is, quite easily, the agent will have been asked about the player. The player will have said, oh yeah, I would go to Liverpool if the circumstances were right. And Liverpool have said, well, we don't want to, we can only pay, I don't know what figures they say, we'll use hypothetical 100, or we'll go to 120 maximum, but we can't pay 150, so it's down to you, you know. And this is the argument now. I don't think they've handled it right. They could have done it now a bit. They're in the mode, what we call in the business, of kick the door down, and he's kicked the door down a bit harder than what I really thought, especially with him having 3 years left of the contract. I think if I was really critical, a bit disappointed. He's kind of disrespected the owners, really, and he's disrespected the club. He's disrespected the manager. He's disrespected the recruitment department, who will have spent a lot of time identifying him and bringing him, and more so, he's disrespected the fans, because he has 3 years left, and he has quite blatantly said, bye-bye Newcastle, I want to play for Liverpool, which I don't think is right, really. It's not morally right, anyway.
I mean, what happens now? Because in my world, there's no way back. Reports today suggest he's told Newcastle he has no intention of playing for them again. But the reality of the situation is that he's not in the strongest of positions. I mean, he can kick up this fuss, but Newcastle still have quite a lot of power because of the contract.
Yeah.
It runs for 3 years. And Liverpool, for whatever encouragement they've given Isak or his representatives, aren't willing to pay what I think is actually a fair market value in 150 million for Isak, because he is that good. He seems to be in a very difficult position now, doesn't he? And I don't see how he moves to Liverpool unless Newcastle buy 2 strikers, so one being Wissa and XYZ, the other, and Liverpool come up with a package that is worth 150 million. Now, Liverpool fans are adamant he's not worth that, but
on the modern day market, if you're spending 100 million on some of the players that spend 100 million on, he's a no-brainer at 150 million, because he's a difference player. Listen, when Newcastle first signed him, I was a little bit critical about his finishing. I never saw him as a great finisher. Do you know what I mean? He's not like a Gary Lineker who in them days, who was there in the box. You know, he wasn't that type of centre forward. But it has improved. you know, and he scores more worldies in the harder chances, the half chances than the simple. So I was a bit, but just his overall game, the running of the channels, he's always been good. He's pacey. I mean, listen, the only fella, I mean, the fella that could replace him is Sesko, but he's not as good as Isak. No, at this moment in time, without being disrespectful to him, he's a bit more physical, but he plays the game similarly, but he ain't as good as Isak. You know.
What about the young chap in Portugal, Sam, who plays for FC Porto? He's had a prolific season last season, 19 goals.
Yeah, but these have got big shoes to fill. You know, you can't. What I said to you earlier, you can't replace a difference player. It's like Man City when they lost Rodri. People say, "Oh, teams don't get worse because of one player." Well, I'm sorry, they did with him. And Kevin De Bruyne losing a couple of yards of pace, you can't replace them kind of players. I know I've gone off on it, but I'm trying to give different. And like Pep would you couldn't replace Højlund. Do you know what I mean? That's why I think a big influence why Pep decided to stay at Man City was because he must have had a conversation with him and said, "Look, how long are you going to be here for?" Because if they thought he was going to go to Real Madrid or somewhere like that, you know, you got zero chance. So Isak is in that elk, you know what I mean? That's his ilk. He's a top player, and we could sit here for 2 hours and not come up with any names that are better than him, because there isn't any. If you're one of the best in Europe.
And that shows you the issue Newcastle United have got, because they're not going to want to sell until they've got a replacement in.
Well, they need two. They need two, Andrew. You know, you've got to have two, because you still wanted a one in, even if you had him, because you've lost Wilson, and you need for you to have any chance in the European competition, you've got to have two. And one, I mean, you may laugh at this, but if you were Newcastle, if I'm sitting in Newcastle, then I would feel a bit hurt. I'd feel angry at the way he's done it, what he's done. And I'm sorry that if the fans disagree with me, but it's just...
I don't think they do.
No, but I would feel really angry.
Fans feel just like that.
And I would... One way it could happen, which wouldn't suit him, would be if a Saudi club paid 150 million and say, "No, we've got an offer from, I don't know, whichever Saudi club, we've accepted the offer, go to them," because he can't hurt you there if he's playing in another. Now, would Isak go there? Doubt it. But that was one way you could get your money by using. I mean, Newcastle have Saudi owners. I'm sure there will be people in Saudi that can say, "Look, you don't want to buy this," which would resolve a situation. But you would still have the situation of who do you replace him with? I mean, you're limited with. I mean, who would you get? I mean, at a pinch, I mean, Villa have signed another striker. Could you go and pay over the odds for Watkins, who's a similar type of player? Is he as good as Isak? Not really.
Nicholas Jackson has been linked. Chelsea.
Hey, Jackson's a better player than what it's like he's marked with. You know what I mean? I think he's a better player than what he is. So it is an option, but Chelsea will want an inflated price, and especially if any club now. The sad thing for Newcastle is because they know Newcastle will be desperate for a striker, then the price becomes inflated, and there's very little you can do about it. They'll say, "If you want the player, that's the price."
And you've also got the issue of the African Cup of Nations as well. So we had Wissa in and Jackson. Come December, you're left with Gordon and Asula, so that doesn't work. Personally, I would like to see Watkins in, and I think him and Wissa would be enough goals in the back of the net for the next 2 years to guarantee you.
They would be bought as a double. They would be good additions. They're good additions to the squad that you have at the moment. Yes.
The age is the issue. Newcastle are not going to have a 28 and a 29-year-old up front. Do you think we get a little bit too fixated on this whole they're too old. They're
No,
not going to have
well,
any
I had that problem once before, at Birmingham. And I remember David Sullivan, who owns West Ham now. I remember the conversation with him. I was because Steve cringes when I tell him this story. Because when Crystal Palace were in the hands of the receiver, before he took it, they had to sell players to raise some money. And I did, when I was at Birmingham, I did a deal for Moses, Klein, and Zaha for £1 million. But that was on the Monday, and the deal had to be done by the Friday. So I said to the manager, it's a no-brainer, because Moses went on to play at Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? And whatever, he went on to have a good. Klein still playing, he went on to play, and Wilfred was, he was a 16-year-old son with a talent. So the deal was a no-brainer. I remember we didn't take it, and I remember David Sullivan's reason for that. He says, Paul, there is no future without it today. We need for any money we have, we need to sort players for. And I said, but Moses will play for us now. And he obviously mustn't have fancied the day, whatever. But it's the words that stuck in my mind. And he is right. There is no, and that goes to what you've just said. There is no tomorrow. We could say, oh yeah, in a perfect world, we want all young ones who are going to be good players in a year or two. But what about today? You have to get today right to give time for the involvement and give time for if you're investing in the academy and you want the academy to have a conveyor belt of young players. That just doesn't happen overnight. We go back into the days where we used to have a conveyor belt with the Gascoignes and the Lee Clarks and the Steve Watsons and the Stevens. You know what I mean? When it was a never-ending scenario. We need to get back into that. Yes, I agree with that, but that takes time. And, the people who are involved in the government will need time to get that conveyor belt. So in the meanwhile, what you have now is you have to get what's right now. So regardless of the age, if that player is going to keep you in a Champions League position, or that player is going to help you progress in the Champions League, possibly win the Champions League, whether he's 28, 31 or 32, if he can play, he can play,
How do you see this ending then, just finally, with Alexander Isak? Does he become a Liverpool player? What would be your message to those Liverpool fans who are adamant he's not worth £150 million? Would you say...
I don't want to encourage Liverpool fans. Because really, in a perfect world, we don't want to be having a conversation of where he's better at. We really would love to have the conversation of how we're going to resolve him to be playing. Personally, I don't see it happening, because I know I put myself in, I don't know how strong they are in Newcastle. I don't know I think Eddie Howe's done a brilliant job, but it's just, I know most managers in the company, but he's somebody who I've never crossed paths with, unfortunately. But I don't know what his character's like. If his character is strong, because if he's strong, you would have him and the guy in the office and tearing the strip off him. That's what.
I don't think he's taken this current situation too kindly.
Right. Well, I would be having a lot of choice words. You know what I mean? Like, and I know I've been one manager who would be the same. But that still wouldn't resolve the problem. If the player wants to go, he wants to go. You can't bring him back into the squad at the moment because it's not right.
He's like I say, the report is that he's refusing to ever play for Newcastle United again. But if Newcastle,
allegedly, or has he actually said that?
That has come from a report in the Athletic. You imagine it's probably been briefed from the side of the representatives. Newcastle at the moment haven't stood that up. I mean, there is a chance that Newcastle, as we said, don't get that replacement in for him. Are they going to let him rot in the reserves? Surely not. Player of his talent?
No, but there's a lot of legalities you can go through. I mean, it's really going to be messy, to be honest. And you don't want legal messiness, because he could be fined, contract or breach of contract. I mean, there's loads of things you go. But the bottom line is, we're talking about a footballer with a football team, and a footballer is not bigger than the football team. never ever will be, no matter how great a player is. He's not bigger than the club. The club now, as we know, we've kind of feel as though we're repeating myself. The club have a really, really difficult time here to resolve this.
But they've got to stay strong in terms of that price, haven't they? They can't. I mean, Liverpool put a bid in of £110 million. That's well below what it's worth. Even though they are in a very difficult position where the players are clearly very unhappy and potentially disruptive, they can't sell them on the cheap, can they? They've got to hold out.
You've got to. I mean, it would be a lot easier if there was a player there that they could throw in the mix, which would help the fee to be a lot more amicable for both sides. But is there a player that you would take from Liverpool? I don't see a player who's not getting a game who would, especially. But you would need a striker. And Liverpool, and they don't have it because they signed the other boy who Newcastle fancied as well. I could take so they've got both. They would have both of them who Newcastle had identified to play for them. So where do you go from here? Really, really bad situation, handled badly by the player and his representative. Now Newcastle are left with a mess, for want of a better expression. And quite frankly, you need to sort the mess. You don't want to drag it out because your season starts in a week's time. And you need to know the man needs to know what wicket he's batting. He needs reinforcement. He needs reinforcements in, I mean, where do you go from here? I mean, this is the $60 million question. Where do you actually go? And you need in a perfect world, you need two. So we are, it appears, and don't look near one. If you've got to pay a little bit over the odds, you've got to pay over the odds.
It is believed Wissa will be potentially in the squad for the game against Aston Villa. That's what they're hoping for. But again, he's kind of gone down the similar route to Isak, not to the same extreme.
Yeah, he's kicked the door down at Brentford. This is the way forward. It's all football, you're getting the expressions from behind the scenes. He's obviously, Newcastle have reversed the role and done with Wissa what Liverpool have done with Isak. Now he's kicking the door down at Brentford. But listen, is he a replacement of Isak? I don't see that. I don't see him as a totally central striker.
He's Wilson's replacement, isn't he?
Yeah.
Squad. Before we talk just about how the book's gone, we mentioned right at the start of the show about director of football, and it's believed that Nottingham Forest's Ross Wilson will be the replacement, and how he's had a bit of time at Rangers as well, where obviously you were a few years ago with Alex McLeish. I mean, have you come across Ross in the game? He's well liked from those you talk to at Nottingham. Those at Rangers not so on board with it. Do you think he'd be the right fit for Newcastle?
Well, listen, Ross has done. They've done quite well at Nottingham Forest. I go off. In the modern day, you can get some amazing CVs. But all I would say is, what have you done? Like in the game, what have you actually done in the game? People can write CVs and they look absolutely fantastic. Personally, I've never done a CV for any job that I've had. It's I just went from club to club, manager when 1-1 left. Something was there for me. Oh, come here. So Ross, it'll been Rangers. It went a little bit sour in the end. It was a bit negative, towards the work that they did, etc., etc. But at Nottingham, they've done well, and if Ross is being the person responsible for that, then he needs the credit, he needs the credit for it. Sometimes people get credit and it really wasn't themselves who did the good work, for want of a better expression. But yeah, he seems to, from what I know of him, he seems a really nice lad, and they need someone. I don't know if he's that strong enough person to to fill this gap that I think is needed. But maybe I'm a dinosaur. Maybe this is the new way. And what I would say to you, well, the new way doesn't work as good as what the bit of the new and the bit of the old did. With the old school kind of methods in going to sign a play.
Well, there we have it, ladies and gents. Do get into the comments and share your thoughts on anything that we've spoken about with regard to the transfer window in Newcastle United. Just before we do bid you guys farewell, I said there on the shelf, can you reach over, Paul, and grab your book without injuring yourself? So this is Paul's book, just holding it up to the camera. Rough Diamonds, how a nightclub boss found football's future stars. And there on the back, just to prove what Paul has done in the industry, he's there with Alex McLeish, who was lifting the Carabao Cup today, Carling Cup back then, as part of the Birmingham City side that won it. I think was it at Wembley, or was it the Cardiff City Stadium?
Was it Wembley?
Was it Wembley?
Yeah, we beat Arsenal.
Yeah,
2-1. An old Newcastle player signed on loan. Yeah, scored the winner over Femi Martins. Yeah,
it's a great book full of transfer tales and the players.
And they've just to say that the publisher, they're happy with where things have gone. They've now released it on Audible and Kindle.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Fantastic. So,
and if you don't like the football, I know you could buy it to read in bed, and it'll help you sleep.
But full of Paul's transfer tales, no doubt. You'll enjoy it. Drogba, Bernard, what have you. We obviously went through it when it was first released, so I'll pop the link into the podcast description box to where you can buy the book, but also the previous episode that we did when it was launched, where Paul goes into a little bit more detail about his time on the circuit of those who talent spot in this beautiful game. Paul, thank you very much for popping in. It's been a pleasure as always. To you guys watching, please hit thumbs up. Please hit subscribe to the channel. If you're listening later on the audio-only channel, please leave us a rating and review. And remember, take advantage of some very special discounts when it comes to NORD VPN by clicking the link in the podcast description box. I'll see you guys very soon.